lesson 14, and we're going to go through the questions and answers tonight. And if you could just be thinking about, we have one more lesson, and I've already asked Greg to teach lesson 15, which is the book of Revelation. He did a fabulous series on that, about a year, 2 years ago maybe? I don't even know how long ago it was. Time flies, so yeah. I'm not sure how long ago it's been.
It's
2 years?
Close to 2, yeah.
He's saying 3, so I know it's been a while. My opinion, much more knowledgeable than I am. He's going to be able to convey, the message of Revelation a lot better than I would. So I appreciate Greg doing lesson 15 for us. But be thinking about things that you've learned so far, because at the end of this class, I want to see if you've learned something new or something that maybe you've relearned or something that you want to speak up and say, hey, I remember this about the scriptures, or something new that maybe you learned. But we'll talk about that, and then, like I said, and then Sunday, Greg is going to be starting lesson 15 with Revelation for us. All right, so let's go to the questions and answers on page 207. We'll start there. What is an anonymous letter that many scholars believe may have been written by Paul? Hebrews, that's right. Hebrews. B, 2 letters that Paul wrote back to back from Corinth. Anybody remember what that is? Yes, ma'am.
1st and 2nd Thessalonians.
That's correct. Yep. If you look back at the chart on page 198, it has Paul's letters arranged chronologically, and it says who was written from and who was written to, and the journey and all of that. It's really good chart, because if you remember, we talked about the letters not being in chronological order in the Bible, and why is that? How did they section them out? What do you say? Say it out loud. You got it.
Biggest to the littlest.
Right. So you have Paul's letter. You have the largest letter, the longest letter, down to the smallest letter, and that's kind of how their minds thought back then when they were arranging the Bible, rather than chronologically. And we've seen that in several different other areas in the Bible where they've done it by whether it be poetry or history or things like that. We talked about them grouping things like that up. So that's the way they did Paul's letters, was biggest to smallest. C, the term used to describe the non-Pauline letters to help distinguish them from his is what? Y'all need a book?
General letters. Yeah, we need a book.
You need a book. General letters. Who said that?
Rayford.
Right. Yes. General letters. So yes, general letters. So you had the Pauline letters, or the Pauline epistles that was written by Paul, and then you had the rest of them were the general letters. D, one of Paul's traveling companions who is never mentioned in the book of Acts. Titus, correct. E, the longest of Paul's letters. Romans, right. And F, if not the first of his letters, then it was written at the end of his 3rd missionary journey from Corinth. Galatians, right. And then the city where Paul was arrested and then taken to Rome. Jerusalem, right. And what was the last letter that Paul wrote?
Second Timothy.
Was it?
Second Timothy.
Yep, 2 Timothy. The author of 5 New Testament books, 4 of which bear his name.
John.
John, that's right. So you had the Gospel of John, right? And then 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and then of course Revelation. One of the half-brothers of Jesus who wrote a 1-chapter letter. Who is it?
Jude.
Jude. Yep. Who was Jesus' other half-brother who wrote a book?
James.
James, right. All right, so a more technical term for the New Testament letters often used by Bible scholars.
Epistles.
Epistles. And what was the difference between a letter and an epistle?
One's private, one's public.
Yeah, the epistle could be private also.
Directly to somebody.
Yeah, it's more of a formal document, and the epistle was normally, generally made for public, but we do have situations where they weren't, like Philemon, it was directly to him. Titus, Timothy was directly to them, but generally it's formatted and written in a way that it wasn't just a correspondence back and forth, like, hey, how you doing today? It was more of a a teaching or a reprimand, that kind of thing. It was more of a formal document. And then the city from which Paul wrote 1 Corinthians on his 3rd missionary journey.
Ephesus.
Say it again?
Ephesus.
Yep, Ephesus, yep.
Ephesus.
All right, turn to page 208, and this is start of the fill in the blanks. Which 2 letters did Paul write back to back from Corinth while on his 2nd missionary journey?
Thessalonians.
Yep, which that was part of the matching question earlier. Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Corinthians while on his 3rd missionary journey, but not one right after the other. From where did he write each one of those? And you can find that on page 196, 197. Where did he write 1 Corinthians?
Ephesus.
Ephesus. And 2 Corinthians?
Macedonia.
Macedonia, right. Explain in your own words why Hebrews through Jude are referred to as the general letters.
Because it's to everybody.
Say it again.
Because it's to everybody.
It's to everybody, but it's, yes ma'am.
To distinguish them from Paul's writing.
Right. Yeah, that's the main ones. They're different writers, and it distinguishes from the Pauline epistles, the Paul's letters. So you have Paul's letters, which is 13, and then you have Hebrews there, which could be Paul, could be a group of people with Paul, and then you have the rest of the letters, right? The general letters.
Do you think that Paul might have been the most educated of all the apostles? I mean, he had I don't know if he was more educated, but being a student of Gamaliel, the law.
He was definitely a Pharisee. He was very well could have been, yeah.
That might explain why he wrote so many letters.
Yep.
Because Peter, he's a fisherman.
Right.
It would be different education levels, and
Right.
and I think that might have something to do with it. The fact that he wrote so many letters.
Yeah, I would not doubt that one bit. Yeah, I mean, that's probably correct.
I mean, how the Bible would say, are not all these Galileans?
Right.
That's not real. nice way of saying it.
Right,
That
right.
They weren't the upper echelon.
That's right. Why are the letters of the New Testament particularly valuable to us in the 21st century, us as 21st century Christians?
The same reason they were for the first century Christians. There's no difference, that they're timeless, and they tell us how to behave and how to act and what is expected of us.
That's right. That's big, right? And what's expected of us, right? We talked about that with not only personal conduct, but the church, right? If we didn't have the letters that Paul wrote to each one of the churches, we really wouldn't know about
Marriage,
and what else?
Elders,
Elders,
how a church is autonomous, and how the churches were set up in those times, and how the elders were appointed, and
Right.
the fact that there's two, not one.
right?
qualifications.
Plural of elders, and then deacons. How to handle problems that arise within the church, how to reprimand, how to teach, how to grow, how we're supposed to deal with one another, how we're supposed to deal with those outside of the church or those in the world. All of these things we learn from the letters, and without that, we would kind of be in the dark, right? So, I thought you had to look like you wanted to say something. You had that look. Sorry, Gray. But yeah, how to dress, how to talk, how to worship, church organization. Let me see. I've got a note here, top of page 200.
Also about contributions.
Contribution. That's right.
How they're collected, and when they're collected, and how they should be handled, and money.
That's right. Yeah, so we learned so much.
Basically, our relationship to each other, our relationship to God, and our relationship to the world.
That's right.
It's actually the new covenant, what we need to do.
Yeah, so if you look at the top of page 200, all of the books of the Bible in both the Old and New Testament are profitable for us today, but the 8 general letters are especially applicable to all groups of people, regardless of where or when they might live. Just like Leo said, it was good for the first century Christian, and it's good for us in the 21st century, right? By inspiration, they specifically address many pressing issues that affect us today in our 21st century American culture, from advice on how to deal with persecution, holy living, hospitality, family relationships. These letters hit hard on many subjects that help us live our daily lives as Christians now. And then even in addition to those, like we talked about church organization and things like that. And then you look at 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture is breathed out or inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, correction, and for training in righteousness.
It's been said so many times, but something that was written 2,000 years ago, there's so many things today that you look back, even in my time, I look back when I was younger in the 50s, things have changed so much, it's just unbelievable. It's just, things aren't the same.
That's right.
Bill, when we drive around Plant City, he tells me all the things, how it used to be, the dirt roads, but even more than that, society and what the pressures are and all this other stuff, and yet it's still perfectly relevant.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing how that you could come up with words 2,000 years ago that continue to be relevant every single century.
That's right. you know, there's a lot of people of the world that doesn't understand the Bible, and you might hear them say, "It's an ancient book. That doesn't apply for today," or that you know that was so long ago. I mean, it's good. That's a good read, but it's not. You know, times have changed. You know, but it's not the truth. You know, that's not correct. Yes, sir.
When I was in Massachusetts, I used to put quotes from the Bible, and I forget where it comes out. It says, "The tongue of man has tamed every form of beast and everything."
Yes.
The tongue is, and you know, I forget how many verses I put. There was a man that came in there, and it was on the bulletin board, so he just stopped and read. He says, "Wow." He went over to the owner of the company. He says, "Who in the world came up with that?" He says, "Oh, that's Leo. Go ask him." I says, "Oh, it's right out of the Bible." It is?
Right.
He thought that was one of the greatest things he had heard in a long time.
Right.
There's 1,000 things like that in the Bible that people, if they would be willing to, and we do the same thing. Greg said something the other day that I felt I had that experience, that all of a sudden you're reading scripture, or you're listening to it. Most of the time we listen to it on audiobooks, but if all of a sudden something will come out, you'll say, "Wait a minute." And one of the things that recently came out, and Greg mentioned this in one of his lessons, I think it was, it says, "For the joy that was set before him, Jesus was willing to suffer on the cross." What was the joy? What is that joy that was set before him? What is it?
The joy that was
It's
set
you.
before Jesus.
We are.
Huh? Yeah. That is church.
Yeah,
That people had an opportunity to get to heaven.
that's right. Salvation. Right. That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of times where you can read it. You read a certain story over and over and over again. And that was one of the joys that I found doing this lesson, was either I read it again, pulled something else out of it, or hey, I don't remember that being in there, or every time you read something, just like Greg said about James, I don't know if it was something that I said or something that I read that James wrote, whatever it was, struck him as, hey, I never thought about it this way before. He learned something new, and then he shared it with us. So that's what's been great about, in my opinion, this whole overview of the Bible so far. And is being able to reread it, and we didn't go into depth in a lot of the things. We just kind of, when you think about it, we did an overview really, and but I think we all probably learned a little something from it. Hopefully, if not, just at least touched on it again. So so the letters of the New Testament are particularly valuable to us because, well, without them, we wouldn't know how to conduct, ourselves and the church and things like that. And everything is profitable for us to for our own understanding and for reproof and to help us, do what's right. So there's no difference now as opposed to the first century Christians, which they were wrote to. So, who wrote the most individual books in the New Testament? It should say which individual wrote the most books in the New Testament, really, but Paul, right? Yeah, the Apostle Paul. Number 2, this letter is sometimes called the Proverbs of the New Testament. I had not heard that, and have you ever heard that? The Proverbs of the New Testament. Which book is it? James, right? I had never heard it nicknamed that, but it's all. It says that it's sometimes called the Proverbs of the New Testament. Which and I really like Greg's sermon the other night about how straightforward James was on multiple. I mean, he went through every chapter and just and Peter was like that to some degree. Paul was like that. Paul had a lot of other words, but he didn't back down from confronting an issue. And that's what I like about Paul. He might have done it more colorful, a lot more words in his letters, And, you know, that might be because of, you know, what Randall said, you know, I mean, he was more of a learned man, and had a lot of vocabulary. James was, you know, brother of Jesus, probably grew up in Nazareth, and he, you know, he didn't have as many words, so he just told it like it was, you know?
And that's why I had heard that when I was doing my biography of the Bible about the Proverbs. And the reason that has happened is because James jumps from one subject to another very quickly. He says, this is what I think about this subject, and then he goes on to the next subject, the next subject. It's just like Proverbs.
Yeah. Okay.
He doesn't talk like Paul could go for 4 or 5 chapters on one particular subject.
Right.
James just doesn't do that. He has
Right.
several subjects almost in every chapter.
Yeah. I wondered if at James, if they had bullet points back then, I wonder if it would be bullet point this, bullet point that, and be done with it, you know?
That's
If
all
that's-
I've got to say about that.
That's right. That's right. But I never really thought about it, you know, like that until Greg did that sermon Sunday. That was really good Sunday night. Which we already talked about this too. But number 3, which 5 books of the New Testament did John the Apostle write?
B.
John.
B. Those, the Gospel
1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Revelation.
and Revelation, right? And which apostle only wrote 2 New Testament books? Peter, 1st and 2nd Peter. Yes, sir.
And that's the right answer.
Right,
As far as
However.
what can be proven.
right. But,
Studiers of the book of Mark say that he dictated that to Mark. So
Yep.
you can't really argue that he wrote the book of Mark.
right,
But it's interesting to know that as you study the book of Mark and really get into an in-depth master class of knowing that book, you start to see the fact that this is a
from Paul, or
a
from Peter.
recital of listening to Peter's sermons.
Right, yeah.
So
So he was
If
the
you want-
background, he was
if you
the,
want to be like me and nitpick, then I would
Right.
say he wrote 3, but
Right.
that's not really, that's
Right.
not true. I'll even admit
Right.
that's not true, even though I want to say it.
right,
Because I know that Mark was listening to
right,
Peter when he, you know,
But
it's almost co-written,
right, right.
but you can't say that.
Well, that's kind of like Paul, you know, he's not, you know, in the Pauline epistles, and then you have Hebrews with the general, which, you know, could have been a mix, could have been Paul, could have been
Right.
whatever, same thing.
Right.
Yes, sir.
help me out, Mark wasn't an apostle, was he?
No,
No,
Luke was. Luke wrote 2 books, but he wasn't an apostle either.
right.
that's correct. Yeah,
And,
yeah, you just had Matthew and John were the,
and concerning, writing something by listening to someone else, that's the entire book of Acts. Luke wasn't there, so, I mean, a lot of it. And so he was getting all of this from all these other people.
and, you know, they often call Acts, you know, we talked about this, as kind of part 2, right? It was just kind of a continuation of Luke, and it picks up right where Luke ends off with the ascension, and kind of picks up right there too, and just, you know, all right, now we're going to change over to the Acts of the Apostles, and kind of tells that story. But, you know, and we talked about this already. Sometimes these questions are duplicated. Which of Paul's letters is his longest? Romans. Yep. All right. For discussion, when Paul said that he was going to be poured out as a drink offering, what do you think he meant by that?
He's going to die.
Yep. So that was a common metaphor in the Roman world during that time, meaning death.
Blood shed, blood poured out, and the symbolic way that he's happy to do that, so to speak, for the
That's right.
Lord as a sacrifice of his own self in obedience to the Lord. So
Yeah,
yeah, he's literally going to be poured out. He thinks one way or another,
right.
his blood's going to spill.
That's right.
Also, if you think about how his body is an earthly vessel and he's going to be poured out, his, you know, because his spirit's going to leave and he's going to leave his vessel and will be poured out of it.
Yeah, very nice way of putting it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I
If you want to
really
be nice
heard that.
about it,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
That's accurate.
yeah, absolutely. In Philippians, Paul said, he made a comment that I might be poured out. What do you think he meant by that? I might be poured out.
Lead to death,
Say again?
lead to death.
Yeah, but I might be poured out. He was unsure whether or not he was going to die right there at that time or not, right? I might be poured out, you know. But yeah, that's what it means is death. And not just death, it's
Life.
persecution, death, right? It's
Yeah.
being killed for the gospel. Taking a sword.
The Romans
Taken-
form of death was never easy.
Right. Never non-brutal, right? That's right. The letters teach us a lot about daily living, but what about the Gospels? Besides telling us about the life of Christ, how do Matthew through John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, also teach us about practical Christian living? So we learn a lot from the epistles, but what about the Gospels?
You learn a lot there too.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus gave us, he showed us what we had to do.
His examples,
So, examples.
yeah, on how to deal with people, how to have compassion, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
For our salvation.
his healing of all these different people showed us the example of caring for others.
Right.
And he talked about that. He said, you know, the cup of cold water, the Samaritan, it all deals with how we deal with other people.
That's right. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. You know, he talks about you know, practical living and how we need to treat people and how we need to act, right? And like Tammy said, his examples, you know, how to treat people even when they're treating you bad, right? He was the ultimate. I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, you know, just like we talked about Joseph Kony, somebody kills his daughter and hey, that's in God's hands and he's still communicating with that person. It's hard for me to feel like Jesus and being whipped and crowned with thorns and being tortured the way he was, and please forgive them for they don't know what they're doing, you know. Stephen being stoned, you know, as he's dying, as he's about to take his last breath, that's one of the last things he said was, you know, please forgive them. You know, he looked up into heaven, and that's hard, and but time after time after time, that's what we see in both words and examples, that's how we're supposed to be as Christians, and that's not easy, not easy at all. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about persecution. We're not persecuting nothing compared to what they were back in the first century. You know, we get made fun of. We get, you know, not in this country anyways. There are countries where there are still killings, there are still beheadings, and we've seen a little bit of that here in the States recently, right? Somebody wants to proclaim Jesus or talk about their faith, and they've been killed. But it's not like it was there in the first century at all. Did you have something else?
I was gonna say, Jesus, I don't know where I heard this Jesus also showed what the poor are to do and all of that, but he also showed how to deal with power. He could heal people, but on the other hand, just as much, he could have put people to death instant. He could have taken their life instantly.
Right.
He had this unbelievable power of miracles and wielding it. And we see him staying humble, not when people were after him, I've always thought how hard it must have been for him to put up with all of that, knowing that he could have gotten out of it instantly, or he could have taken vengeance on people. That's one of the sins that a lot of us commit, is having anger or vengeance, or being upset with people. He just dealt with it in an amazing way.
Yeah, I mean, he could have called legions of angels, right, to stop everything.
Yeah, he came down here to be like us.
That's
How
right.
hard it was to be like us, but he proved that it wasn't hard because he was sinless
That's right.
through his tortures.
That's right. And he was tempted like us.
Yeah, he knows how it is to be us.
Yeah. And you can see, on a much less of a scale. I'm not trying to compare the two, but in our world, right? We had the hires up in a company who maybe, how hard is it to do whatever? Well, they're not living in the weeds, right? That you might be, doing the things on a daily basis. They don't know how hard it is, right? Come down here and, work out here with us in the hot container all day long, or, try to keep up with this job and that job and that job. That's on a very, very, very small scale in comparison. But, sent Jesus to this earth to be in the flesh, to have the sin, or to have the temptation to sin, to have the persecution, to have the ridicule, to have the torture on the cross. He knows what it's all about, and was able to do it, I thought y'all have these looks sometimes that
No, I just don't wanna go there.
go there. Come on, Leo.
Okay, there's several companies, Virginia is notorious for this. There's several companies in Virginia that have extremely high ratings nationwide. One of them is the company that makes colostomy bags. His name is Hollister. They're the #1 company in Virginia, and here's what they do. Before you work in any department, it doesn't matter if it's accounting or human resources or whatever, you have to spend 3 months as a janitor, and then 3 months on the assembly on the line that actually makes these things, and then you go to your position that you were hired for.
Yeah.
They do that because it allows management to understand exactly the fundamentals that are going on. Because sometimes if you get into a situation where you've never been down in the dredges, you just don't know how it is, and so you make poor decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so this company, and everybody wants to work there because they all have profit sharing anyways. There's a lot of things that go with that. But when you said that, that's one of the things that they do. And the people that I've talked to that were in maintenance and management and stuff said it's the best thing that they ever did.
Yeah.
It let them understand exactly how this whole thing works.
Yeah.
That's why I think elders, it says don't make people elders if they're young, if they haven't had a lot of experience, because when somebody comes up with a problem or something, you might not have their exact experience, but at least you've been around and you've seen what's happening. It kind of humbles you after you've had your own bad
Sure.
things happen.
That's right. Number 3, the letters present doctrinal material about the fundamental teachings of the gospel. Isn't it more important to simply live a good life?
I don't understand that.
I don't either.
It's, because you can't earn your.
I left that one blank because I was gonna hope y'all jump on this one because I didn't understand the question either.
Well, who defines what a good life is?
Right?
It's the gospel. It's the Bible that defines what a good life is. So, if if you think, well, I'm a good person, well, according to who? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, where the, writer was going with this. I don't know if that's not a sarcastic question, but maybe isn't it kind of tongue in cheek, maybe?
Well,
don't
I
know.
think he's trying to tell us that, well, if I live a good life, because everybody said, if I live a good life, I'm gonna go to heaven.
Right,
No, you
right.
cannot do anything to go to heaven,
Yeah.
yeah. I
And
think that's what he's.
isn't it more important just to simply live a good life? But no, the letters present doctrinal material about fundamental teachings of the gospel, okay? But it also, nobody ever promises a good life. Are we supposed to act right? Are we supposed to conduct ourselves right? Yes.
I'm just gonna ask Greg something.
But, not really.
Cornelius.
What is it?
Cornelius, he was a good
You can
man,
hardly see who it is.
right,
but
This
he
one
still
here.
had to be taught what to do to be saved.
right. No, that's right.
And back,
Just got that.
Yeah. No, that's right. Absolutely. So it's not just about living a good life, and we even touched on this on Sunday, where you'll hear, you might hear people talking about not going to church, right? It's like, well, I believe in God, and I do this, but I don't need to go. Well, we have example after example after example that people met and took Lord's Supper, and they met and they sang and they prayed, and here's how you're supposed to conduct yourself. It wasn't a matter of do you go or not, do you meet or not. That wasn't even really up for debate, So for people to say, well, I love God, I live a good life, but I don't believe I need to be going to church all the time. And that's just not Bible teaching.
It's not a good life if a almighty God gives you life and you don't care about what his doctrine is.
Right,
And you ignore him and for what you call a good life.
right,
And he's giving you clear instructions and you don't want to hear it.
right.
It's not a good life.
No.
That's the opposite of a good life. You got a holy God who gave you life and continues to give you every breath, yet you're not going to consult him.
Right.
That's not good.
Right.
That's not just. It's far from holy.
Yeah.
But our culture thinks it is.
Right.
They're convinced.
Who else do we read about that lived a good life but failed to consult God and his decisions? There's been a few, but
Rich guy that had the.
Solomon, yeah, that's who I was thinking of, was Solomon. He didn't consult, and how did that turn out for him? So, wise man, knew a lot of stuff. Everybody came to him. He was rich, but there was something missing, right? And it was he was acting and not consulting God and his decisions. So,
I'm curious about Agrippa.
yeah.
Paul said that I know you know these things, so he knew this. And the way he respected Paul is
Yeah.
admirable
Oh yeah.
and persuaded to a certain degree by, as far as what people call a good life, he's a successful man.
Right.
So that's a good life too, but
Right.
I wouldn't trade places with him for anything.
Right. No, that's right. That's right. Number 4, each of Paul's missionary journeys took tremendous dedication. How can we be equally as dedicated to serving Jesus today right here in our own communities? I don't know if we can equally, but do what?
Go to events as a group and talk to people, plant a seed.
Yeah. I think we
We need to do something.
all need
out
to
there
do something. That's right. That's right. We have it here in our own communities. I know there for a little bit we're sending letters out to everybody. Whether it be we can write to the prisoners that Steve is with. We can knock on doors. We can hand out flyers. We can do whatever we can do to help spread the gospel. But also, another thing that Paul did was he encouraged other brethren too. On these missionary journeys, it wasn't 100% getting new converts. He was dealing with other Christians and helping encourage them and being communicating with them also. So yeah, those are some of the things that we can do here in our own communities, and we have the availability at our fingertips, literally, with our phones and everything, right? We couldn't talk to people across the world or across the country or anything like that. You set up, you can do something with this, There's a girl that I know that recently set up a ladies' Bible study at local Panera here, and she said, "Hey, any ladies who want to come and join with me?" And she's got about 10 or 12 people. They meet every Tuesday night now, and they're going through the Book of John, and that's very admirable that she's willing to open it up, and it's not just let's say members of the Church of Christ. She attends a congregation. She attends the Church of Christ. But she just opened it up to all of her friends and say, "Hey, I'm going to have a Bible study. Anybody who wants to come, please come and join me. And from this time to this time," and they sit around a table every Tuesday night, and they have a Bible study, which is very commendable. So hopefully, lives will be touched with that, and they can learn the truth. So, can anybody tell me what you've learned so far that's different that maybe you forgot about, or something that you've learned that you didn't know before we started this? We've been at this since April. We've been at this for 7 months now.
Well, when it talks about James as the Proverbs, book of Proverbs
Yep.
of the New Testament, I never thought of it that way, and it really is because it gets to, it talks about the motivation,
Mm-hmm.
Why people sin,
Right.
It's so, obviously, scripture, it's so insightful though, and it's so vivid, the pictures that it uses to describe, like, the tongue, like Leo was saying.
Right.
It's very cool.
Yeah. And we already know one that you found that light bulb went off just by
Oh, yeah.
how blunt James was and how to the point.
Shocked how
Yeah.
I missed that all those
Right.
years. And
Right.
because, not just because it's there and I didn't see it, because it was my personality that should have seen that a long time ago. I appreciate if had I been around James, I would want to hang around with
Right.
James, because I feel like he and I think alike. And that's probably me being biased toward me because he happens to be the
Right.
half brother of Jesus the Christ. But nevertheless, I just love the way he just says greetings and moves
Right.
on. I love
Greetings.
that.
Let's get to the point.
Yeah. But what I loved about this study the most was the emphasis on the 12 prophets,
Yeah.
and learning about how the ancient Jews counted them as one book and all that. It was all together.
Yeah.
And so after we get through the book of Revelation, I want to squeeze in a study about those 12 prophets. So that's what I got the most out of this
Right.
study.
Right. What were you about to say, Leo?
I was gonna say, when Marie and I have watched you on the road, and we didn't, because we went to other places, but the thing that came across to me is how God's plan is so perfect. How he went through all the old ages and was so patient with people, and then they didn't follow what he wanted, and then he was patient again with them, and then he sent them a savior, and then he sent us a savior. And it's just, when we read in John that God so loved the world, it's just absolutely obvious from the beginning of Genesis all the way to the things that we're finding out in Revelation. God really cares about us. And what Greg said earlier is that when people are good, they don't realize that God wants them to be good in a certain way. You see, there's people I know that would never hurt anyone else. They're always humble. They're always kind and considerate, but they would never consider going to church. They're not interested in the Bible. They just want to be good people. It's like a car. It's like you own a car, and you do everything except you don't change the oil. You put tires on it and everything else. I don't need oil.
That's pretty
I don't
important.
even- I don't even check it. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to turn it in, you know, that end day, it's not right.
Right.
There's just more to living good than a lot of people realize. And a lot of people don't go to church because they think it's full of hypocrites.
Right.
But actually, it's full of salvation, and it's full of joy, and it's full of concern, and the people that you meet in congregations all over the world, Christians, it's just a family that's beyond our comprehension, you know?
Right. Hospitals are full of sick people too. I'll go to the hospital and full of sick people. Well, we're trying to get better, ain't they?
Yeah.
What I learned the most is how patient God really was. Because I wasn't too familiar with the Old Testament.
Right.
And reading that, oh my
And
goodness.
time and
Over
time
and
again,
over
again.
and over
Yeah.
and over and over.
That's right.
I learned how patient he really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And through the whole, and the reason why he was patient is he had a plan. He had a Messiah. He had a Savior.
Yeah, he punished him on the way too.
And the love, right? He couldn't have patience without love, right?
Yeah.
And his loving kindness is everlasting, right? It's just, who else? Who else has got something that they learned or want to bring up before we close? One of the things that I learned is I didn't realize, I forget what lesson it was. It was about the prophets, how intertwined all of, like, how the overlapping and all of that, like the destruction of Jerusalem and the exiles and all of that. I didn't realize how many of them lived at the same time period, and how all that kind of overlapped as much as it did. A couple of them even knew each other or were around the same time. A couple of them even mentioned others in their book, and I didn't realize, kind of how all of that was in there. I forget what lesson that was at. I think it was lesson 10, 11. Yeah, lesson 11. There's a lot of overlapping, and these charts that he's got in this book is really good. It helps you visually see it. But some of these, of course, we knew Elijah and Elisha knew each other because it talks about the passing of the torch basically for them. But some of the other ones, I didn't realize how much of those interwove with each other. So that was really good for me to be able to see. But it's been a good lesson, or a good series of lessons. And one of the things that I want to do right now is I was trying to think of a psalm that kind of encompassed the whole Bible. And number 9, our God, He is alive. From the first verse, so think about these things as we're singing this, but we're going to sing this. But it talks about basically God at the beginning. Verse 1 is creation, right? And then it goes into the prophets and people that God was able to talk to. And then the last verse is, of course, Jesus Christ on the cross. And that's what it's all about from start to finish, the great plan. From creation all the way up to Jesus. And then, so we're going to sing this song, and then I'm going to have a